Hello everybody and welcome to this video of the Simplified opening series. In fact, this will be a two-part series, small series, in which I will give you a repertoire for black after the moves e4, c5, knight f3, g6. I first noticed this move order in a way after it was used with great success by Nakamura at the candidates tournament in Toronto, when he used it to make an easy draw against the ultimate winner Gukesh. And I was surprised because this move order has never been considered that great for black, as it gives white quite a bit of different options uh, in the opening, especially giving the chance for white to play the Marozzi bind with the move c4. Nevertheless, the games that Nakamura played after the candidates tournament, he played this move, this variation in a way, very often, showed what he had in mind against various options that white has, and it turns out that he made a really comprehensive, very compact repertoire after these two moves. So in this first part of the repertoire, I will cover the two of the main possibilities that white has, and in the second part I will cover the main lines, the Marozzi bind and the dragon, the transposition. A curious aspect of this move order is that a lot of various transpositions are possible, as I mentioned, the dragon, the Marozzi, and also sometimes even the Caro-Kann, but that's less important. So let's see what Nakamura primarily had in mind. e4, c5, knight f3, and now g6. Usually the players who played the accelerated dragon or the Marozzi started the move with the move knight c6, and after d4, cd4, knight d4, they played the move g6. Allowing c4 or knight c3 with the dragon, so either a dragon or a Marozzi. But it transpires that Nakamura was probably fed up with finding what to do against the Rossolimo with bishop b5. So instead of dealing with one variation like the Rossolimo, he decided to create a whole new system and find interesting ideas in all the alternatives that open up to white after the second move g6. So the main idea of the move, like I mentioned, is to avoid the Rossolimo with bishop b5, not minding a transposition to the open Sicilian, or giving white extra options. So in this video, we will cover two of these main options. The one is the move c3, a major option for white, intending to go with d4 and create a full pawn center, which can, but not necessarily, lead to the some variations of the Alapin Sicilian. With this in mind, I will mention it a bit later. It's also a handy way for black to cut down on preparation. For example, after the Alapin c3, d5, e5, queen d5, something like d4, g6, knight f3, we will have a transposition to the lines that we will be looking a bit later on. So again, like I said, it's a kind of a comprehensive, kind of compact repertoire for black. Knight f3, g6. So one line that we will cover here is the move c3, and the other line that we will cover in this video is after d4, cd4, now the move queen d4. So these two lines we will cover in this video, whereas in the next one we will cover the main lines after knight d4. So let's start c3, intending d5, d4, and d5 now for black. Now there is a major fork on the road. White can choose a different type of position which one to play. One is to push e5 and give the position a more closed character, and the other one is to take on d5 and transpose to the Alapin Sicilian. So let's check both e5 and now bishop g4. This is what Nakamura has always preferred. Magnus Carlsen had a game against Vachier Graf last year. He played a6. I guess it's a possible move. The idea is obviously to stop bishop b5. It's a possible move, but I think it's less precise than Nakamura's bishop g4. I also think that bishop g4 is easier to play simply because in this closed position, black basically wants to go e6 and obtain a French type of a structure, e6 d5, but without the bad bishop on c8. You can also call it a Caro-Kann structure with the bishop already outside of the pawn chain. Now white can go d4 or can give the check bishop b5. Usually after d4, knight c6, bishop b5 play will transpose. One additional option after d4, knight c6 is the move knight bd2. But after cd4, cd4, a very important move for black to play is the move queen a5. And this is quite unpleasant for white, because there are a lot of these pins on both knights and attack on the pawn on d4. After queen b3, queen b4, black exchanges queens and obtains a very good endgame. So the game we are following is Maurizio Nakamura, played online, bishop b5, e6, castles, take on b3. Now it was better for white to take on c6 first with an equal position. He took knight b3 and he was immediately worse after knight f3, bishop f3, gf3, knight g7. Dream scenario for black. Solid structure, no weak pieces, weaknesses for white, and eventually Nakamura won. So this is an additional option, knight bd2, but it's not so threatening as we could see. So let's start with the move bishop b5, simply because after knight c6, apart from d4, there are two more options for white, which is one to castle short, and the other one is to take on c6 immediately. So let's explore these options. Let's start with d4, which is the most natural move. And here Nakamura has played the move queen b6 on more than one occasion, but I think it's more precise to take on d4, because after queen b6, bishop takes c6, bc6, white has the additional option of d takes c5, releasing the tension, and this seems to give white a pleasant position. Queen c5, castles. Let's say bishop g7, rook e1. And it's pleasant for white. Bishop can come to f4. The bishop on g7 is not so active because the e5 is well protected. Knight bd2, knight b3, controlling d4, it's c5 squares. This is comfortable for white. So that's why after d4, it's better to take on d4, avoid this possibility. And after cd4, queen b6, now black is fine, having avoided these dc5 ideas. So bishop c6, bc, queen c6 is also possible, but I like bc because this gives the option of later on to play c5 and target this pawn on d4. Knight bd2, connecting the, the threat is to take on f3, and queen f3 is met by queen d4. So the pawn is hanging, knight bd2, and now an important move, queen b5. Queen b5, preventing castling. And here, Nakamura had two games against Martinez Alcantara. In both, white played queen b3 and e6. Again, we are having more or less a dream scenario for black. Super solid structure, ideas to undermine the center further on, and the light squared bishop can always be exchanged with the for a knight, and black won't have any bad pieces. Another, let's say, sample how things can go bad for white. Queen b5, cb5, knight b3. We saw the same idea from the Maurizio game, take on f3, gf3, knight e7. And again, these weaknesses will tell. Nakamura failed to win this one, but he has an advantage. Alternatives to go h3, and now he played bishop f5 in a game. He won against Martinez, but taking is simpler, I think. Take, knight e7 with problem-free position. Knight can come to f5, c5 at some point after the queens are exchanged. No problems whatsoever. So that's the move d4. In the, let's say, the original game that this line was played at high level, the move bishop c6, bc6, and now castle was played. The game was Gukesh Nakamura. And here Nakamura played the interesting move c4. It's also possible to play without any complications, just take on f3, go e6, and obtain the solid structure. Let's say d3, a5, knight d2, knight h6, knight comes to f5, bishop can come to e7, h5, something like this. Maybe a4 at some point, rook b8. No problems for black here. But c4 is interesting, and it can lead to more complex position. For example, Gukesh played the move d3, but b3 is also possible. And here it can lead to more, let's say, murky positions after either bishop g7 or directly f6. So take on c4, take on e5. D3, knight f6. And then bishop g7 and short castle. It's quite a complex, uncommon central confrontation of the pawns, but black is objectively fine. Whereas what Gukesh played d3, cd3, queen d3, Now the knight threatens to move away, so bishop takes f3, queen f3, bishop g7, and black is problem free here. Queen e2. And here Nakamura played queen c7, rook e1, e6. I think e6 immediately is simpler, simply because black wants to go knight e7 and castle and finish development. So let's say knight d2, knight d7, b4. This was played also in the game, but now a5, undermining this grip that white is hoping to obtain over the dark squares d4 and c5 with knight b3. So a5, if a4 castles, let's say b5 takes, queen d7, and now rook is coming to c8 or something. Knight c8, knight b6 can be possible. The pawn on c3 is a target. Black is fine here. So this was the this was played in the game Gukesh Nakamura. And the third option is to go castles, and now rook c8. Now it's possible to go without queen b6, rook c8. I'm just defending the knight on c6, preventing the doubling of the pawns. Let's say d4, cd4, again eliminating possibilities of dc5, cd4, and now queen b6, attacking the bishop. Take on c6, otherwise knight c3, e6 simply, bishop e3, knight e7. It can quickly go south for white. This was, for example, played in the game Vrolik, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, Van Forest, played this year, 2025. White played natural moves and ended up worse. h3, take on f3, queen f3, bishop g7. Now it's equal, but only 4 moves later, black was better. Bishop takes e6, rook c6, rook fc1, castles, knight a4, queen b5, queen d1, rook fc8. Black is better. Control over the c file, better bishop. Yeah, eventually black won. So again, a dream scenario, you know, this Caro-Kann structure with a better light pieces. Therefore, taking c6 on c6 immediately is better, but after rook c6, black is fine. Knight bd2, bishop f5, targeting the c2 square. Rook e1, bishop c2, queen e2. Now e6 simply was good. Nakamura played queen a6. We are following the game Anand Nakamura, played in 2024. Queen a6, rook a6, rook e3. This was a bit dangerous because after rook e3 there are ideas like rook c3, and if rook c6, rook a3, targeting the pawn on a7. Knight a6, a6, knight b3, e6, knight c5, and here Nakamura misplayed it. He should have taken on c5, dc5, rook c5, knight d4, rook c4, bishop e3, queen king d7. It's equal, but it's clear why he was a bit worried, because the knight bishop on c2 is a bit loose. Yeah, if black manages knight e7, rook c8, he'll be fine, but for the time being, white has compensation for the pawn. That's why I think a bit earlier, instead of queen a6 and exchanging the queens, e6 was simpler. So this is the move e5. As you can see in the majority of lines, black gets this very good version of the Caro-Kann. Yeah, the bishop is out, e6 is played, and no problems whatsoever. Now let's turn our attention to the move e takes d5. Queen d5, and here now we are in Alapin territory. I mentioned after d4, I mentioned this move order when I via the second move c3. So d4, bishop g7. Now there are 3 main moves for white, but the main move is knight a3. Knight bd2 has a similar idea of controlling the c4 square, but the knight is not so well placed on d2 because it blocks the development of the bishop on c1. So after cd4, bishop c4, queen d8, knight d4, knight f6, castles, it's problem free for black. Let's say knight f3, queen c7. Black will often get these type of positions with both sides having solid pawn structures. I recommend it actually these lines for these positions for white in one of my previous videos when I was talking about white repertoires based on pawn structures. And I said objectively these positions are equal, and who plays better with the pawn majorities will feel more comfortable in these positions. So Nakamura here played 2 games against Naroditsky and against Samunenkov. Not surprisingly, he won both. And what he did was kind of important to note. After queen e2, bishop g4. This is why I'm showing this line, because black is not opposed to giving up and exchanging the light squared bishop in order to speed up the development. So h3, take on f3, knight c6. Yeah. And then black will play e6 with an extremely solid position. So, like I said, you can check these games against Naroditsky and Samonenkov, both won by Nakamura. So that's why knight bd2 is a bit lame, yeah, or tame. Bishop e3 is another idea, but again, nothing spectacular. Take on d4, cd4, cd4. The idea is to go knight c3 and attack the queen, so queen moves away, check, knight c3, knight f6, bishop c4, castles, castles, and again bishop g4. We have a standard, in a way, position with an IQP on d4. Black is perfectly fine. Bishop f3, knight c6, c6. No problems whatsoever. That's why knight a3 is the main move, cd4. And now there is a fork again. There is knight b5, threatening knight c7, and there is bishop c4. So we will take a look at both. Knight b5 first, threatening check on c7, so knight a6. Yeah. And now knight bd4. It's also possible to go bishop e3, a bit pushing it a little bit, yeah, attacking the pawn on d4 for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. But after knight f6, bishop d4, it is possible to sacrifice the pawn on a7 with short castle. Black gets compensation, but there is no need. You can just play b6. Castle, bishop e2, bishop e7, and then castle next without any problems. Therefore, knight bd4 immediately, knight f6, bishop b5, bishop b7. And here again, white has a choice. He can go queen e2, take on d7, take on a6, but everywhere black is doing fine. Yeah. As it's kind of obvious because black finished basically development. There are games by Nakamura here, you can check them. Probably the most critical, even Carlsen played this line with black against Kismatulin, played online in 2023. He won after bishop d7, knight d7, even though queen d7 is also possible. Maybe most critical is bishop a6, ba6, wrecking black structure and obtaining a passed pawn on the c file, but giving up the pair of bishops. But again, castles, castles, rook e1, rook e8, knight e5. White obtains some sort of activity, but black is fine, either by retreating bishop c8, which was played in the game Spar Nakamura, played in 2025, or rook ed8. Yeah, and then dropping the bishop back to e8. Yeah, and if white exchanges, then e5 becomes a possibility, and black has good presence on the d file. So that's the move knight a3 and knight b5. Knight a3, cd4. Okay, sorry, knight b5. Yeah. So now we check bishop c4. Check on e4, bishop e3. It looks like a blunder, but actually it's a trap because cd4, d3 is losing because of bishop f7, and if king f8, queen d8, so black is forced to take on f7, but then knight g5 wins the queen. Therefore, knight h6 should be played, covering the f7 pawn. Now there is a choice for white. There is cd4, there is bishop d3, there is knight b5, but all of them are pretty harmless. In fact, cd4, castles, castles, after knight f5 will transpose to the line after knight b5, because white will play knight b5, but there is an additional option of bishop g4 here. Yeah. So it's a bit less precise. Bishop d3 can lead to a quick draw, as played in the game So Nakamura. But if black wants to I'll show you the draw now, but if black wants to continue, there is queen d5, bishop c4, queen d8. Take on d4 and castles. And again, we have this typical position with the majorities. Black has 4 in the center, let's say, and white has 3 against 2 on the queen side. And the draw is queen g4, immediately attacking the pawn on g2. The bishop is still hanging. cd4, queen g2, rook g1, queen h3, rook g3, queen h5, rook g5, queen h3, and repetition. So another harmless line. So knight b5 is the main move. Castles. Yeah. Bishop is attacked. So c takes d4. And now black has a choice. Knight f5 is considered like the most concrete. But there is also nothing wrong with knight c6. I think this is the more natural move, avoiding the rook being trapped after knight c7. Let's say knight c3, queen f5. Yeah, black is fine. The threat is knight g4, and after h3, queen a5. And things can get really messy. For example, if white goes ambitiously with g4, trying to get the knight on h6 with queen d2, Now knight g4, a g4, bishop g4, and surprisingly here black has good compensation. Rooks are coming to the center, c8, d8, and white is attacked from all sides. And it's kind of unpleasant. The pin on the knight on f3, threats along the DNC files, e5 becomes an idea, the pawn on d4 is targeted. Actually, good compensation here for black. You can explore this if you want. Knight f5, yeah. And the line here that black needs to know is that knight c7 is actually good for him after knight c6, knight a8, knight cd4. It's a bit of a forcing line, but works out well for black, ending in a perpetual check after knight e4, knight e4 castles, and now the only move bishop h3, threatening mate. So gh3, now knight f3, king h1, knight d2, check. Only move, king g1, knight f3, and perpetual. So a bit of a forcing line, but good one for black. And in case of queen e2, there is a6, knight c3, queen c6, castles, and queen c7 now. Nakamura played knight d7 against Zhigalko this year, 2025, which he also won. But I think queen c7 is a bit more natural because simply liberates the c6 square for the knight. And black has a good play against the IQP, a standard position. So this covers the c3 line against the second move g6. As we could see, there is either transposition to the Alapin after ed5 or the closed positions after e5, but in all of these lines black is doing quite all right. So now let's take a look at the other line after d4 cd4, and that is the move queen d4, attacking the rook on h8, so knight f6, and now two moves for main moves for white, e5 and knight c3. Bishop b5 is a rare move, but not a very good. It prevents knight c6, but only invites a6. Yeah. So now bishop a4, b5 makes no sense, therefore e5. But now a takes b5, e takes f6, knight c6, hitting the queen, and here black is doing quite all right. The structure is a bit messed up, but the pair of bishops more than compensate. So f takes e7, otherwise black will play e6. Yeah, and then pair of bishops for basically nothing, and f6 is rather weak. So take on e7, queen e7, queen e3, queen e3, bishop e3, and b4. Important move, preventing the knight from being developed to c3 and preparing bishop g7 to target the b2 pawn. The engine even gives some advantage to black here. So the main move is knight c3, but there is also e5. Yeah? And this again can become a bit forcing. Knight c6, queen a4, knight d5, queen e4, knight b6, knight c3, bishop g7, bishop f4. So far natural moves, both sides developing, but now it's already critical because white wants to castle, and then if he manages to put the rook on the d file, black will be pushed really pressed really hard along the first 2 or 3 ranks. So white will have an advantage there. Therefore, it's a last chance for black to go to play the liberating move d5. And after ed6, bishop f5. Here, black sacrifices a pawn for very good activity. So the queen is attacked. Now, if the queen retreats, castles for black, castles for white, ed6, rook d6, queen c8. Black is a pawn down, but look at all his pieces looking towards the queen side. So there are ideas to take on c3, knight b4. There is idea of rook e8, bishop f8, and then maybe bishop b4, knight b4 again. Very, very strong piece activity on the queen side and in the center. So this is good compensation for black. And if d takes e7, there is a simple solution like take on c3, bc3, take on e4, take on d8, rook d8. Good compensation for the pawn as c2 is hanging, and these 3 pawns on the queen side are not really a threat for black. But there is also a forcing solution, forcing line that eventually leads to a draw. Queen d7, queen e3, and knight b4. Now things become dangerous for white. There is a threat on c2, rook c1, knight c2, rook c2, bishop c2, bishop b5. Oops, the queen is lost, but not quite. Bishop c3 check, queen c3, queen b5, queen h8. Crazy line, yeah? King takes e7. Note that the material is equal. After such a massacre of pieces, material is equal. But after queen d4, There is a threat on queen d6, bishop d6. Knight d5 is the only move for black. And now things end up in some sort of an equal endgame. Queen e5, king d7, queen d6, king e8. White can repeat moves, but in case of knight d4, queen b4, knight b4, we have an equal endgame. A long forcing line, but not really necessary to remember. As I said, there were simpler solutions earlier on. So going back to the position after knight f6, the main move being knight c3. Knight c6, attacking the queen, queen a4. The threat is to go e5, so d6, controlling the square, intending bishop d7, so e5, d5, knight e5. And here, the vast majority of strong players have played, I think, the simplest move here, bishop d7, but there are other moves as well. Maybe the simplest one is queen d4. And after knight c6, queen a4, knight a4, bc6, the endgame is equal. This pawn is easily defended, either by a king or a bishop, or depending on circumstances. And black has easy development. Bishop can come to g7, knight can come to d5. It's supported by this isolated pawn on c6, for example. The endgame is equal here. Even though white can claim to play on thanks to the better structure, but objectively it should be fine for black. And there is also the pawn sacrifice. Bishop g7, take on c6, bc6, queen c6, bishop d7, queen a6, and castles. This is a bit more vague because black won't get the pawn back immediately, but the compensation is very good. Yeah, thanks to these open files on the queen side, queen c7 can come, rooks can come along the b and c files. It won't be easy for white to deal with the pressure along these files. But bishop d7, avoiding all that, is probably the simplest. And after knight d7, white wins the pair of bishops, but black finishes development and obtains good position. Both recaptures are possible. Let's say queen d7, bishop e3, bishop g7, rook d1. Now queen g4, as has been played by Topalov, is possible. The endgame is fine. Or queen c8, bishop e2, castles, and the move e6, which I mentioned earlier when I was speaking about Nakamura's games. E6, controlling the d5 square and obtaining a very, very solid bulletproof, basically, position for black. The alternative is to take with the knight, bishop b5, bishop g7. And now taking the pawn after immediately bishop c6 or castling first and now bishop c6 is a bit more concrete because bc6, queen c6, rook c8, black gets to target the pawn, the knight on c3 immediately. Now let's say queen a6, take on c3, bc3. Many moves are okay, queen c7, queen b6. Black will most likely regain one of these pawns. Whereas after queen f3, if white tries to hang on to the pawn on c3, bishop c3, bc3, queen a5, again black gives black enough compensation. Yes, white can defend the pawn, but a2 is under attack, and the knight can start jumping to e5, to c4. The rooks can be doubled on the c file, maybe rook d8, and so forth, with the easy game for black. So this concludes the first part of our repertoire series on the Sicilian e4, c5, knight f3, g6. We covered one of the major options for white, third move c3, and also the move queen takes d4. As we saw, black is quite comfortable in all of these lines, and it's one of the reasons why this move order has become actually quite popular. In the next video, we will take a look at the main lines, the Marozzi bind, and the dragon variation. So thanks for watching this video. I hope you appreciate it. As always, check my courses, check my Substack newsletter. If you want to support my work, consider becoming a paid subscriber to my Substack. And of course, if you haven't done so already, make sure you smash that subscribe button and keep watching the videos. Don't forget, next video up will be next week with the second part of the proposed Nakamura repertoire. See you there.